Over 126 of you voted in our recent poll asking what role in software sales do you have? The data suggests that the majority of you who watch this channel are sales development representatives. We have such a tremendous community. My mission is to elevate salespeople's belief in themselves, so I'm so happy to have you here. If you like voting in polls, I really like voting in polls, make sure to drop a like on this video below. New Chapter commented on that poll asking, Trent, can you talk about the difference between an enterprise SDR and a normal SDR? I assumed that enterprise SDR was actually higher than account executive. New Chapter, that's a great question. And for those of you in sales wondering questions yourself, feel free to comment them down below or connect with me on LinkedIn at any time, as I'm happy to message with you individually, answer any questions you have. And if you comment down below any video ideas or curiosities, questions, thoughts, I will turn them into a video. This was such a great idea. I spent the first 2 years of my career in software sales as a sales development representative. I've made over 40,000 cold calls, and I've spent time on multiple different business units aligned with our enterprise customers, aligned with state and local government customers, aligned with small, medium-sized business customers, aligned with regular corporate customers. So I have a lot of experience working in different verticals, and I'm excited to talk about the differences in different sales development roles. Just to level set with you, a lot of people refer to SDRs and BDRs interchangeably. A business development representative is essentially the same thing as a sales development representative. Let's talk about what the purpose of an SDR is, and then we'll talk about the differences in roles in aligning to different business units. The purpose of an SDR is to generate pipeline. You will call into companies, you will identify who is your buyer persona within that company. For example, the director of sales. You call the director of sales via cold call, you send them emails, you message them on LinkedIn, whatever it takes to set up that initial meeting, and from that point, you're then converging the meeting into demo, discovery, running the sales cycle to close revenue. The more pipeline an organization has, the more revenue it can close, and ultimately the purpose of sales is to accelerate top line revenue growth. So it's really important to have a lot of pipeline to generate more revenue, and that's the purpose of SDRs. When we think about modern SaaS, software as a service companies, they typically structure their business into different business units. Of course, they have different product lines. Aside from that, you have business units. So for example, at my company, we're public, you can find all this online. We have an enterprise business segment, which works with companies greater than $5 billion in revenue. We have a corporate segment that works with companies between essentially 20 million and $2 billion in revenue. And then we have an SMB, small, medium-sized business, that pretty much works with companies less than like 5 billion. That's gonna be nuanced and different for all companies. For example, ServiceNow, they consider enterprise customers 5,000 employees or more. So it's gonna be different based on companies. And when we think about my own career as an SDR, I started in the corporate space. I worked with organizations of all sizes, from a couple $1 million in revenue to a couple $100 million in revenue. And that was great because it's such a different experience working with a business that does 50 million in revenue versus a business that does 5 billion in revenue. There's gonna be much less people in the department you're trying to call into. And when you call into these enterprise accounts, think about it. If you're doing $5 billion in revenue, think about the budgets, the size of the budgets as a percentage of revenue. For example, most Fortune 500 companies allocate like 1.0% something to IT spend, and that's like tens of millions of dollars, opposed to a company that is only doing $30 million in revenue. They can only allocate so much. So we can judge companies based on revenue, based on how much money we expect them to spend. And as an SDR, you don't really have to worry about any of that, because as an SDR, you're focused on generating pipeline. As an SDR, I was able to promote through the ranks. I really struggled when I initially started because I had never done it before. I didn't know what I was doing. Eventually, I learned that I'm selling time. I need to be efficient. I need to be consistent. I need to be succinct with conveying a value prop. I learned all of those cornerstones skills as an SDR. One, my quota was generating an X number of qualified opportunities. So I would have to set up meetings, and if that meeting went well, it was qualified into an opportunity. Essentially, I needed between 10 to 15 opportunities a month. It varied. Eventually, our organization woke up and said, you know what, maybe we shouldn't incentivize these guys on qualified opportunities. We should incentivize them based on pipeline generated. If you're a sales leader out there, you want to incentivize your workforce based on pipeline generated, because not all opportunities are created equal. If you create an opportunity with JP Morgan, the pipeline amount on that opportunity could be in the hundreds of thousands. If you create an opportunity with your local mom and pop barbecue shop, they may only be able to spend $1,000. Those opportunities shouldn't be equally weighted, so you should incentivize your SDRs based on pipeline generated. So as an SDR, how do you go about generating pipeline? Luckily, this isn't a video talking about prospecting skills. You can find many of those on this channel. And if you're in sales and you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel now. We're bringing a lot of new content on the way, talking about tactical sales, skills, advice, tips, tricks, tactics. There we go. In regards to this video, the question was, what is the difference between an enterprise SDR and a corporate SDR? First and foremost, you go SDR. In my company, I worked in the corporate space, so I called into companies less than $1 billion in revenue, essentially $2 billion in revenue, and that was a great experience. They then promoted the reps that perform well into the enterprise space, so working with accounts that are greater than $5 billion in revenue. The biggest difference is that in the enterprise space, you're doing a lot of automated emails. These companies are so big. In Microsoft, there's 100,000 employees. In some of these companies, there's tens of thousands of employees. So how do you build outreach? How do you build demand? And when you have this company, you have different departments within the company, different business units within those departments. So you never really know exactly what you're doing. You're more so getting a lot of messaging out. And in the enterprise space, the solution you're selling is a must-have for them. They have budget, they make a lot of money, and they must have your solution. Whereas in the corporate space, your solution may be a nice-to-have opposed to a must-have. So it's a little bit easier in enterprise because these guys typically will take time with you, and all you need to do is flash some names. Hey, we work with 70% of the Fortune 500, whatever it may be, and they say, oh wow, what companies in my space? And you say, Target, Walmart, Amazon. Okay, great, I'll take a meeting with you. And that's really that. In the enterprise space, there's a lot more resources, at least in my company, than the corporate space. There's a lot more marketing resources. There's a lot more strategic resources to help with the deal cycle, to help add value to these customers, ultimately so that you can maximize the deal size. When we think about SaaS companies, tech companies, one of the key metrics that Wall Street really cares about is customers spending over $100,000 annually and customers spending over $1 million annually. Those are typically benchmarks as you can start to assess the value of a company and really what you're delivering to customers. So the enterprise space really is so important, and so many of the people I work with and myself aspire to become an enterprise software sales rep. As an SDR, you start in the corporate space, you go to enterprise, when you prove yourself, you're working with big companies, eventually you'll promote to an account executive and actually do the selling. Once you have 5 to 10 years of selling experience, you'll become an enterprise account executive. You'll have a massive quota, and we made a video talking about software sales salaries and why they can be so lucrative. That's the most watched video on this channel. It has over 10,000 views, so go check that out after this. We break it down a lot more in depth than I'm going to go into now, but just know that your on-target earnings, the mix of your base pay and your variable commission, will be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Once you get to the enterprise space, business is quite literally booming and the upside is limitless. And that's why so many reps aspire to get to that space, because you're almost more of a quarterback than you are a great sales rep. You're focused on bringing in the right resources, attacking these companies strategically, and quarterbacking the right people at the right time to play the right role in that deal cycle. So it's really exciting. And when you think about the big brands you're working with, imagine saying, yeah, I sold a $1 million deal to Amazon. Imagine how cool that would be. You're shaping the way people do business, you're shaping the way people work, you're shaping the way people live. And that's why working in technology is so exciting. And if you like money, it's really the perfect synergy between innovation, constant adaptation, product mastery of what you're doing, your skill of doing sales, and ultimate upside and work-life balance as well. So working in software sales really is one of the best career paths, especially going forward. And in particular, enterprise software sales is the crown jewel. So if you want to get there one day, why not start as a sales development representative and figure out how can you become an enterprise software sales development representative to get that experience, get that exposure, and start to understand how do you attack these big companies, how do you get in, how do you build value. and then just what do you do? So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got some value here today. If you enjoyed it, make sure to drop a like below. Leave a comment. I would be happy to turn it into a video if it's good. And of course, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Go and connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll see you there. Talk soon, guys. Peace.